Good night, everyone, and now it's time for another story by the fire, read by Mary T. This one is called The Legend of Bottlehill. So many Irish places' names have their origins in myth and legend. One such place is Bottlehill, which is between Mallow and Blarney in County Cork in the south of Ireland. The story of how Bottlehill got its name was originally published by the folklorist Thomas Crofton Croker in his 1906 book, Fairy Legends and Traditions of the South of Ireland. Near Mallow, a poor farmer called Mick Purcell lived with his wife and children. They rented a small farm from the local landlord and lived as simply as they could, only eating what they grew. But no matter how they scrimped and saved, paying the rent was always a problem. One year, after a bad harvest, their chickens died of disease, and their pig got measles, and Mick didn't have enough money to pay the landlord his rent. "What are we going to do, Molly?" he asked his wife. "There's only one thing to do," she replied. "We'll have to sell the cow at the fair in Cork." Reluctantly, Mick agreed, and he set out the next day with the cow. After a long, tiring walk, he came to the top of a steep hill and met a tiny man, no bigger than a small child. The man had white hair, reddish eyes, a sharp nose, and slightly pointed ears. Mick said hello politely, but kept walking briskly, because he feared the stranger was one of the fairy folk, and Mick knew better than to get involved with them. The little man, however, followed Mick, and soon they were walking side by side, though walking was probably the wrong word, because the little man seemed to float along the road, his feet hidden under a long coat. "Where are you going with the cow?" asked the stranger. "I'm going to sell her at the fair in Cork." "Will you sell her to me instead?" Mick didn't want to have any dealings with the little people, but to refuse could be dangerous. "How much will you give me for her?" The old fairy pulled out a glass bottle from inside his jacket. "I'll give you this." "An empty bottle? What good is an empty bottle? My wife will kill me if all I come home with is a glass bottle. A bottle won't feed my family or pay the rent." "This bottle is worth more than any amount of money you'll get at the fair." "I think I'll take my chances at the fair," said Mick. "Take your chances all you want, but how do you know you'll get a good price at the fair? How do you know the cow won't die before you reach Cork?" The little man smiled a nasty grin, and Mick couldn't help but think the fairy was threatening him. "Make up your mind, Mick Purcell," said the little fellow. "How does he know my name?" thought Mick. As if reading his mind, the fairy said, "I know all about you, Mick Purcell. Now what's it to be?" Out of fear, Mick handed over the cow. The little man gave him the glass bottle in exchange. "When you get home, put the bottle on the table and say the words, 'Bottle, do your duty,' and you will get what you deserve." Mick thanked the man and began to retrace his steps towards home. When he glanced behind him and saw that the little man and the cow had completely disappeared, Mick knew for sure that he'd just done a deal with one of the Scythe, the fairy kind of Ireland. He hurried home and surprised his wife, who was sweeping the floor. "Mick, you can't have been to Cork and back already." "I sold the cow to a man on the road." "And how much did you get for her?" "This." Mick pulled the bottle out of his jacket. "An empty bottle? You sold our cow for an empty bottle? What sort of fool are you, Mick Purcell?" She clattered him across the back with her broom. When she calmed down, Mick told her the whole story. "The bottle is magic, you see." Said Molly, unconvinced. "Let's see." Mick placed the bottle in the middle of the table and said, "Bottle, do your duty." Mick and Molly's children gasped as a twinkling light swirled around inside the bottle, and then from the neck of it emerged a little man's head. Molly stepped back from the table in terror as the little man lifted himself out of the bottle and then reached in to pull a companion out, identical in size and appearance. Together, the two sprites began pulling tiny golden plates and dishes out of the bottle. They grew to full size once they were placed on the table. Then the men pulled out silver knives, forks and spoons. After that, they produced the most marvellous assortment of foods from the bottle: roast beef, boiled ham, honeyed vegetables, creamy mashed potatoes, apple tart and plum pudding. When the table was covered in food and the air sweet with delicious smells, the two tiny men disappeared back into the bottle. "I told you the bottle was magic," said Mick, dancing around the room. That night, the family dined like royalty, licking every crumb off the golden plates. With the children now in bed, Molly said, "Indeed, your bottle is magic, Mick, but we can't exactly pay the landlord with roast beef or mashed potato." Mick picked up one of the golden plates. "I bet this would fetch a pretty penny though." The next day, Mick took the plate to Cork, but made sure to go a different route so to avoid the hill where he'd met the fairy. The plate turned out to be pure gold, and Mick sold it for more money than he ever had in his life. He was able to buy a new horse and cart and still have money left over to pay the landlord. After that, the Purcells always had money to pay the rent. When they ran out of it, they just sold another golden plate. When the plates ran out, they just commanded the bottle to do its magic. Indeed, they got so rich that they splashed out on cattle, jewellery and fancy clothes. After a while, their landlord started to get suspicious. None of his other tenants were prospering so well on their tiny farms. He called round to ask Mick where he was getting the money from. Whether it was due to honesty or boastfulness, nobody knows. But Mick told his landlord all about the magic bottle. The greedy landlord offered Mick a great deal of money for the bottle, but Mick declined. "Why would I sell the bottle for money," he said, "when it is itself a money-making machine?" "Then sell it for something that money can't buy," said the landlord. "What do you mean?" "I'll give you your farm in exchange for the bottle. You'll never have to pay rent again." Mick was so excited about the thought of never paying rent again that he accepted the offer without thinking carefully about it. After that, things didn't go so well for the Purcells. Sure, they now owned their own farm, but the magic bottle had made them lazy, and soon they let the farm go to rack and ruin. It got to the stage that they didn't have enough food to feed the children. "Mick," said Molly, "take our last cow to the hill where you met the little man and see if he has another magic bottle in exchange for the animal." Mick did as he was told and returned to the hill in question, leading his cow on a rope. Sure enough, the little man with the red eyes was there. "Well, Mick Purcell, how can I help you today?" "I was wondering if you'd like to take my cow in exchange for another magic bottle." "Well, it just so happens that I have another magic bottle," said the fairy, pulling it out of his jacket and handing it to Mick. "You know what to do with it." Mick nodded and returned home with the bottle. Placing it in front of his wife, he said, "Bottle, do your duty." As before, a light twinkled in the bottle and a little man lifted himself out before reaching in to pull out his companion. But instead of producing golden plates and food, they hopped down off the table and began racing round the kitchen, smashing Molly's crockery and pulling the curtains off the window. Mick chased after them, but they giggled with glee as they slipped out of his grasp, knocking over a churn of milk and smashing the last of the eggs on the floor. One of them threw a sod of turf at the window, smashing the glass, while the other pulled a burning stick from the hearth and set fire to the cushions. The children ran screaming out of the house. While Mick and Molly stamped out the flames on their cushions, the two little sprites squealed in delight as they broke the oil lamp, turned over the furniture, and ripped the feathers out of the pillows. Indeed, they didn't return to the bottle until the whole house was trashed. Molly glanced around at her kitchen, which looked like it had been visited by an angry bull. In despair, she lay on the ground and cried. Mick looked at the empty bottle on the table and remembered the old fairy's promise. You will get what you deserve. I got what I deserved all right, he thought. This is all my own fault. I had a perfectly good bottle and a way to make money forever, but I got greedy and threw it all away. Determined to make things right, he took the bottle to his old landlord, who happened to be throwing a party when Mick arrived. Mick Purcell, what can I do for you? Oh, it's not what you can do for me, but what I can do for you, said Mick. I brought you another bottle. Is it magic like the last one? Mick nodded. Come in, said the landlord, leading him into a great hall full of wealthy guests. Mick saw his old bottle up on a shelf. Show us what it can do, said the landlord. Mick took the bottle out of his jacket, placed it on the floor and said, Bottle, do your duty. Out emerged the two little sprites, giggling in the high-pitched laughter. The landlord and guests smiled in amazement, but only Mick Purcell knew what was going to happen next. Sure enough, the two little fairies began speeding round the room, smashing crystal glasses and fine bone china off the walls. Everyone screamed as glass rained down on them, and they tried to catch the little creatures, but they were too flighty for human hands. The sprites turned over bookcases, pulled down the chandelier, poked holes in paintings, set the curtains alight, threw books on the fire, smashed window panes and cut holes in the upholstered furniture. In minutes, the room looked like it had been hit by a tornado. Make them stop, shouted the landlord. Only if you give me back my old bottle, replied Mick. Take it! Mick waited until the two little fairies had finished destroying the place and returned to their bottle. Then he took both bottles home with him. After that, Mick and Molly became very wealthy. The Purcell children married into prosperous families and became rich too. Indeed, one of their sons married the landlord's only daughter. The landlord had spent such a fortune restoring his wrecked hall that he was too scared to mention the bottles ever again. Mick and Molly lived to ripe old ages and both died on the same day. At their wake, a fight broke out amongst their servants and the two magic bottles were accidentally broken. The little old fairy was never seen again, but from that day on, the hill became known as Bottlehill. Good night, everybody.